Hello, Everly Morrow here. 2 months ago, I thought my life was finally on the right track, until one phone call shattered everything. A call from the man I trusted, the man I loved, and he was about to destroy it all. Divorce. Sure, but $800 million? That was the last straw. Hold on tight, because you're about to hear how a woman went from heartbreak to battle, from being manipulated to taking control. This is where it all changed. I had no idea that the next 2 months would change everything. The phone rang in my hand, and the sound of it was too loud for the silence of the house. I had been sitting by the window for hours, staring out at the view of the city, glass of wine in hand, feeling more disconnected from everything than I had in years. It was supposed to be a new chapter for us, for me. Marriage, this idea of forever, was supposed to feel like home. But now, as the phone vibrated against my palm, I knew it wasn't just the city that had changed. I didn't recognize the voice at first. It sounded distant, unfamiliar, but then the words cut through. "Everly, we need to talk," Callista said, his voice as cold as I'd ever heard it. There was no usual warmth, no tenderness, no softness that once comforted me. Only the sharpness of his tone, as if I were just another business transaction to him. "I need a divorce and $800 million from your fortune as divorce settlement." The words, divorce, $800 million, echoed in my head, growing louder as if the walls of the room were closing in. I stood there, the phone in my hand trembling, trying to process what had just happened. Callista was talking, but his words barely registered. The room, once so familiar and warm, suddenly felt suffocating. The sunlight from the window dimmed with each passing second, as if the world itself was reacting to what was happening. My hands gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. Is this really happening? I asked myself. My chest tightened, the weight of the conversation pressing against me, threatening to suffocate me. I thought I had misheard him. I tried to believe that there was some misunderstanding, but then he repeated it, his voice clearer now, cold, almost mechanical. "It's what I deserve, Everly. We're done. The money is the only thing that matters now." I was frozen in place. My mind raced, trying to process this betrayal. The man I had shared my life with, the one I thought understood me, the one who had once promised me the world, was now telling me that I meant nothing more than a paycheck. Not even a person anymore, just an obstacle. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady myself. The truth was too much to grasp all at once. The love we had, the life we built, everything erased. I slowly set the phone down, my hands still shaking. The silence in the room was deafening. My eyes scanned the familiar surroundings, our home, the space that once felt like sanctuary, now empty. I had built my world here, and yet it felt as though it had all been taken from me in a matter of seconds. "How could you do this to me?" I whispered, the words escaping before I could even stop them. I wasn't crying, but I could feel it building inside me, the anger, the frustration, the fear. I wasn't just upset by what he said, but by the suddenness, the coldness of it all. This wasn't the man I had married. The reality hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been so blind. This wasn't just about money. It was about control. It always had been. The woman in the mirror, she wasn't the same person I used to know. I didn't even recognize her anymore. I stood there for what felt like hours, pacing, trying to pull myself together. My mind was racing, but all I could hear were the echoes of those words, $800 million. I thought about everything we had built, the businesses, the houses, the life. I had sacrificed so much, giving up my career to support us both, trusting him. And this was what I got in return. I thought back to when we first met, how he smiled at me across that crowded room, the way he made me feel like the center of his world. He was everything to me, and I had believed him when he said we would always be together. But now, looking back, it felt like all of it, every promise, every moment of tenderness, had been a lie. A lie wrapped in charm and ambition. I walked over to the wall where our wedding photo hung. I had always loved that picture. Us, so happy, so hopeful. But now it mocked me. The smile I had once worn was gone, replaced by something colder. I took the photo down and placed it face down on the table. My reflection in the window caught my eye. I wasn't the same person anymore. The woman staring back at me was someone new, someone who wouldn't let this break her, no matter how much it hurt. I sat at my desk, staring at the bank statements spread out before me. I could feel the tension in my body, the weight of the decision I was about to make. Everything I had worked for, everything I had built, was on the line. I didn't have time to waste. I began reviewing the accounts, our joint accounts, investments, properties. There it was, evidence of his manipulations. The realization hit me like a lightning bolt. He had taken so much from me, hidden it, and pretended everything was fine. He thought I wouldn't notice. But I did. I saw it, and now I had to do something about it. The cool glow of my desk lamp illuminated the documents as I typed the transfer instructions, moving my assets out of his reach. There was no going back from this. I was done being his pawn. I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying my breath. There was a calmness inside me that I hadn't felt before. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't the victim. I was a woman with a plan. I stood up from my desk, my mind made up. This was my life now, and no one was going to take it from me. I stared out the window, the city lights shimmering in the distance. It felt like the calm before a storm. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. I was ready to fight for everything that was mine. And this time, I wasn't going to lose. I sat back in the chair, staring at the glowing screen of my laptop. The weight of the decision I had just made settled heavily on my chest. The transfer had gone through. My assets were moved. Callista, for now, couldn't touch anything. The finality of it all felt strangely quiet, almost unreal, as though the moment hadn't quite hit me yet. But it had. It was happening. I'd done it. I'd taken control. I wasn't going to let him take everything from me. He wasn't going to tear my world apart without facing consequences. The phone buzzed on the desk beside me. I glanced at it briefly, knowing exactly who it was. Callista! I didn't pick it up. I couldn't. But when the voicemail notification popped up, I couldn't resist. I tapped it, and his voice poured through the speakers, too smooth, too rehearsed as always. Everly, you're making a mistake, he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. This is your last chance to settle this amicably. Don't force me to expose everything for both our sakes. I leaned back in the chair, feeling the sting of his words like a slap, but there was something else there too. Resoluteness. I wasn't afraid anymore. He didn't have the power to manipulate me the way he once did. Too late for that, Callista, I muttered under my breath. I stood up, pacing across the room. The walls felt closer, as if they were trying to contain me, to remind me of what I'd let go of. But the anger, that cold, simmering anger inside me, kept pushing me forward. I wasn't the woman I used to be, the woman who would cry herself to sleep, pleading with fate for another chance. No, that woman was gone. I grabbed the glass of wine on the counter, taking a sip, the bitterness grounding me. The past was behind me. Whatever Callista wanted, whatever game he was playing, I was done. I was done running from this. The apartment felt eerily quiet, the hum of the city just outside my window a stark contrast to the stillness inside. I knew he would never stop. He'd push, and push, and push, until he had everything he thought he deserved. But I wasn't going to let that happen. Not anymore. I had to end this. The next morning, I called the lawyer, and everything felt more real the moment I heard their voice on the other end. It was as though the world was shifting beneath me, and there was no going back. Everly, I've reviewed everything, the lawyer said. You've got a strong case. We'll start the filings today. We'll make sure this goes public. Let the world know exactly what he's done. Do it, I said, my voice steady. I wasn't asking for anything. This wasn't a negotiation anymore. This was my fight. I hung up and sat down at my desk, looking over the documents. I wasn't scared, but there was a new type of exhaustion creeping in. It was the kind of tired you get when you've been awake for far too long, when you've been running on adrenaline, on sheer will, trying to stay one step ahead of everyone else. But now, there was no running. Now, it was time for the truth to come out. I needed to be sharp. I needed to be ready. I spent hours poring over every financial document, joint accounts, investments, properties, everything I could get my hands on. I was methodical in my approach, making sure that no stone went unturned. But with every line I read, every detail I uncovered, it was like I could feel a new layer of anger building up inside me. I couldn't help but think about the sacrifices I had made, the career I put on hold, the dreams I abandoned for him, for us. I had spent so many years supporting him, supporting his career, his ambitions. I'd built a life around his success, around the idea of us being this perfect couple. But none of it mattered to him. None of it mattered to anyone. I closed my eyes and let my mind wander back to the early days. I remembered our wedding day, the way he had looked at me with so much love, so much promise. It felt like a lifetime ago. It felt like another person was standing there with him. Someone I didn't recognize anymore. The memories flooded in, faster than I could stop them. The times I had been overlooked, dismissed, as if my thoughts didn't matter. The way his family had always put him on a pedestal, while I was left behind, waiting for him to notice me. The injustice of it all gnawed at me. He didn't just steal my money. He had stolen my time, my years, my self-worth. I clenched my jaw. I couldn't keep thinking like this. I couldn't let the anger consume me. I had to channel it. I had to focus. This wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about getting my life back. I had always considered Leora my closest friend, someone who would never betray me. We had been through so much together, always supporting each other through the highs and lows. But now, as I stood across from her in the quiet cafe, I was starting to wonder if I had been wrong about everything. Leora was different now. Her eyes avoided mine, her posture stiff, almost guarded. "Leora," I began, my voice steady despite the storm swirling inside me. "I need to know. Were you involved in this? In what Callista's doing to me?" She hesitated for a moment, then sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Everly, I didn't want you to get hurt. I didn't want to be caught in the middle. But I've been pressured by Callista's family. They told me that if I didn't help, I could lose everything too." The words hit me like a slap. My heart clenched, but I couldn't show it. Not now. "You should have told me the truth," I said quietly, my voice colder than I meant it to be. I stood up, pushing my chair back, my hands shaking but determined. "You're not my friend anymore." Leora's face fell. She looked guilty, like she was waiting for me to forgive her, but I couldn't. I couldn't let myself fall into the trap of thinking that everyone I loved would somehow save me. It wasn't her fault, not entirely. She was just another victim of his manipulations. I couldn't save her. I could only save myself. The first few days after Leora's betrayal felt like being trapped in a fog. Everything seemed both distant and too close at the same time. It wasn't just the sting of her words that haunted me. It was the suffocating weight of everything I had tried to ignore for so long. Callista's demands for $800 million, the way he had treated me as if I were simply a tool to be used. None of it had been an accident. I sat at my desk, the coldness of the chair seeping into my bones, trying to process everything. My fingers hovered over the keys as I looked at the paperwork that had once been just numbers and dates to me. Now, it all felt like a silent cry for help. My wealth, my life, my independence. held hostage by a man who was nothing like the one I had married. I could feel the tension building inside me, but I didn't let it show. Every move I made now was calculated. No more waiting, no more hoping. This was my fight, and it was time to play my hand. I grabbed my phone and dialed the lawyer's number. The sound of the ringing tone seemed to echo through the empty room, the silence that followed a constant reminder of just how alone I was in this battle. When the lawyer answered, his voice was calm, but I could hear the professionalism in it. He knew this was no simple divorce. "Everly, how are you doing?" "I'm fine," I said, but the words felt hollow in my mouth. "I need to move forward. I need a plan now. We can't waste time." He paused, sensing the change in my tone. "You're ready, then. I'll set up the first meeting. We'll start gathering everything we need for the court. Let's make sure there's no way he can manipulate this." I could already feel the shift. I was no longer on the defensive. I was going on the attack. I wasn't going to let him destroy everything we had built, and I wasn't going to let him control me any longer. That evening, the weight of the decision hit me again. I sat in the quiet of my living room, alone with my thoughts. The house, which had once felt like a safe space, now felt like a prison. Every corner seemed to reflect the man I had once loved, the man who had promised me the world but had secretly plotted to take everything from me. The city lights flickered outside, an illusion of peace. My thoughts, however, were anything but peaceful. This is it. I stood and walked to the window, watching the city stretch out before me. It was almost as if the distance between me and the world had grown larger. No longer the wife of Callista Reed, I was now a woman with nothing but her will to rely on. For a moment, I thought of the life I had given up, the career I sacrificed, the dreams I put on hold. But then I reminded myself, those were the choices I made, and the only person who could undo the damage was me. No one else. The next day, I went through our financial documents once more. My fingers trembled slightly as I sorted through the investments, the bank statements, the joint accounts. Each transaction felt like a betrayal in itself. Every penny that I had worked so hard for, that I had thought was for us, now seemed tainted by his greed. The realization hit me hard. He had been moving money around in secret. Accounts I didn't know about, funds that had been funneled into his private ventures. I stared at the pages in front of me, a quiet rage building inside me. How had I let him get away with this for so long? I spent the rest of the night on the phone with the lawyer, discussing our next steps. Everything had to be airtight. No mistakes. Every document, every detail had to be scrutinized. The lawyer promised me that they'd do everything to protect my assets, and I felt the tiniest flicker of hope rise within me. I wasn't alone in this anymore. I had a team, and I was ready to fight. By the time I woke up the next morning, the fog in my mind had lifted. I was no longer consumed by the hurt or the disbelief. I had a plan that would get me what I deserved, and ensure Callista wouldn't get away with this. I spent the morning organizing everything. Every asset, every investment, every contract was carefully reviewed and prepared. It was as if my entire life had been compressed into a series of financial statements and legal jargon. But for the first time, I wasn't overwhelmed by it. I was in control. The lawyer was right. Everything had to be perfect. And it was. I spent hours going through every account, checking every last detail. Callista had made a grave mistake. He underestimated me. He thought I would roll over, that I would be too afraid to fight. But that wasn't who I was anymore. I didn't need to react with emotion. I didn't need to get caught up in the mess of it all. I was going to outsmart him. By the time I finished, it was late afternoon. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the room as I sat back in my chair, exhausted but resolute. My phone buzzed once again. This time, it was a message from Leora. "Are you sure you want to do this? It's going to get ugly." I stared at the message for a moment before typing my response. "It already is." I pressed send, the weight of my decision settling in. I wasn't looking for validation anymore. I wasn't looking for anyone to tell me I was doing the right thing. I had made up my mind, and there was no going back. A few days later, I agreed to meet Callista. He wanted to talk. He claimed it was about the kids, about settling things without dragging it out in court. I knew better. This wasn't about peace, it was about control. We met at a cafe, a neutral space, but I could feel the tension as soon as I walked in. He was sitting at a table near the back, his posture rigid, as if he was still trying to intimidate me with his presence. But I was different now. I wasn't the same woman who had fallen for his charm. I wasn't the same woman who believed in him. "You look well," Callista said as I sat down. There was an awkwardness to his voice, the kind that comes when you've already lost the game, but you're too proud to admit it. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I took a slow sip of my coffee, allowing the silence to stretch between us. "I don't want this to go public," he continued, leaning forward, trying again to charm me with his words. "I think we can work this out. We don't have to involve the media. We don't need to fight." His words felt like a slap, an insult to everything he had put me through. I wasn't buying it. "You've already chosen your path, Callista," I said calmly. "You made your choices, and now it's time to face the consequences. There's no going back." He leaned back in his chair, a flash of anger crossing his face. "You're making a huge mistake," he said, voice low and sharp. But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't intimidated. I had already made my peace with it. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," I said, standing up. "And I'm done listening to you. This is the last time we'll speak." The day I sent that final message to Callista felt like the longest one of my life. It wasn't just the weight of the decision, it was the finality of it all. I stood there in the quiet of my office, staring at the blank screen of my laptop, knowing that this was no longer a battle of emotions. It was war, and I had already made my first move. Still, I couldn't shake the image of him sitting across from me, pleading, trying to charm me into submission. It felt like I was seeing him for the first time, not as the man I married, but as the manipulative, selfish person he'd always been underneath. His words had been laced with threats, but I wasn't intimidated. His attempt to pull me back into his world of lies and deceit had failed. I had cut him off, and I was stronger for it. I could almost hear his voice echoing in my head, his accusations of greed, his fake remorse. The same words I had heard countless times before when things didn't go his way. "You're ruining us, Everly." I shook my head, forcing myself to focus on the task at hand. The battle had only just begun, but I was no longer afraid of losing. If anything, I knew I had the upper hand now, and I would do everything in my power to make sure Callista knew it too. I spent the next few days preparing for the legal battle ahead. Every morning, I woke up with a purpose, ready to take on the day with an intensity one hadn't felt in years. My attorney was the first person I called. The moment the phone picked up, I jumped straight into it. "We need to move fast," I said, my voice steady and controlled. "I want everything filed by the end of the week. I'm not giving him any more time to manipulate me." My lawyer, Thomas, paused for a moment. "Everly, I know you're eager, but we need to make sure everything is airtight. This is a high-stakes case. If we rush it, there's a chance we'll miss something important." I understood his caution, but I wasn't about to let Callista drag this out any longer. "I understand. Just make sure we have everything in place. No mistakes." We spent the next few hours going over all the documents, bank statements, joint accounts, properties, and investments. As I sat at my desk, sorting through the endless paperwork, I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was taking charge. Every piece of evidence I uncovered felt like a small victory, a reminder that I wasn't as powerless as I had once believed. I'd spent too many years being overshadowed by Callista, by his success, his confidence, his manipulation. But this was different. I was different. The following day, the lawyer filed the divorce papers. The words, irreconcilable differences, seemed so insignificant compared to what we were really dealing with. Callista's manipulation, his greed, the way he had slowly eroded everything I thought was real, those were the true differences. Later that evening, I sat at my desk again, but this time it was different. There was no more fear, no more uncertainty. I was confident now, ready to take this head on. The first move had been made. Callista would soon receive the papers, and I knew exactly what would happen next. He would try to intimidate me, just like he always did. His threats wouldn't stop there, I was sure of it, but I wasn't going to back down this time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, preparing my response to his inevitable messages. He'd probably try to paint himself as the victim, but I wouldn't fall for it. I had been his partner, his wife, for years. I knew exactly how he worked, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it anymore. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen for a long time. The night outside my window was quiet, but in my mind, a storm was brewing. I didn't feel afraid. I felt empowered. The next morning, Callista reached out. His message was full of his usual self-righteousness, trying to convince me that we could settle things amicably without going public. He acted like he still had the power to manipulate me, but I wasn't fooled. "You're making a mistake, Everly. We don't need to do this in front of the world. I want to settle this privately. We can work it out." I took a deep breath before I responded. "I don't need to work it out, Callista. You've already made your choices. You want to make this easy for you, but that's not how this works anymore." His response came quickly, and I could feel his frustration rising. "You're just making this harder than it has to be," he typed. "We have a family, Everly. Think about what you're doing." I felt a slight flicker of old emotion, sadness, perhaps, or maybe regret. But it was quickly swallowed by the realization that I wasn't the woman who needed him anymore. I didn't need to be saved. I didn't need him to dictate my life. "I've thought about it," I replied, "and it's over. You don't get to dictate this anymore." We were sitting in a cafe now, in the middle of a public place where, for once, I felt calm. I wasn't afraid of what he had to say. There was no more drama, no more games. I had been part of his game for far too long, and I was done. He leaned in, trying to soften his tone. "Look, Everly, I just want us to have an honest conversation. I'm sorry for the way things have gone, but this doesn't need to end like this." I stood up before he could continue. "You've had your chance," I said firmly. "There's no going back." And with that, I walked away from him, leaving the man I had once loved and trusted standing there, his words still hanging in the air. I hadn't been ready for this, for his manipulation, his desperation, but mostly for the overwhelming sense of powerlessness that came flooding in with the news. I had expected a lot of things when I left that cafe, but not this. Not the gut-wrenching need to prove myself, to show Callista, once and for all, that he would never control me again. The message came through that evening, just after I had settled in for a quiet night. I had planned to rest, to get a break from all the chaos, but Callista had other ideas. His message, as always, was a mix of guilt and veiled threats. "Everly, I hope you realize what you're doing. The kids, our life, everything is falling apart because of this. You want to ruin everything we've built." I stared at the message for a few moments, the words sinking in. The emotional manipulation was so typical of him. He knew just what to say to try to make me feel guilty, to make me question my resolve, but I wasn't going to fall for it this time. Not anymore. I turned off my phone and placed it on the table. The silence in the room felt almost suffocating, but I wasn't afraid. I was angry, furious even, but the anger was no longer a reaction to what he had done. It was now a tool, something I would use to fuel my next move. It wasn't just about money or control anymore. It was about my dignity, and I would not allow him to strip me of that. Everly sat up straighter as the phone buzzed again. Another message from Callista. I could almost hear his voice in my head, desperate, as though he still thought he could intimidate me into submission. I wasn't the same woman who had once crumbled at his feet. His words weren't as powerful as they used to be. I opened the message, the sharp, cutting words greeting me. You'll regret this, Everly. You're not only hurting me, but you're also hurting our children. If you think I'll let you destroy our family, you're mistaken. I had heard it all before. The guilt, the blaming, the accusations. He wasn't sorry for what he had done to me. He was sorry that his plan was falling apart, but I wasn't going to let him use me anymore. He wasn't going to manipulate me into backing down. I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keys for a moment. This was my moment, my chance to show him that I was done being his pawn. I slowly typed my response. Callista, this isn't about you or the kids. It's about your lies, your manipulation, and the way you've controlled me for years. This is my life now. I'm done. And you won't destroy me anymore. The words felt cold, calculated, but they were true. I was no longer afraid to stand up for myself. The response I got wasn't surprising. It was the same old tactic, a last-ditch attempt to guilt me. But I didn't care anymore. This was it. I was done. The next morning, I found myself in my lawyer's office, preparing for the legal battle that was about to consume me. Callista had tried to break me, to manipulate me, but I had learned something important in these last few days. I wasn't a victim. I was a fighter. We went over the details of the case, carefully outlining Callista's financial manipulations and the way he had used me for his own gain. My lawyer, Thomas, was calm and efficient, but even I could sense the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just a divorce. This was a battle for my future. We have everything we need, Thomas assured me, flipping through the stack of evidence we had collected. We can take this to court, but you need to be ready. It's going to get ugly. He won't go down without a fight. I nodded. I knew that, but I was ready. I won't back down, I said, my voice steady. I'm not going to let him walk away with everything. Thomas smiled slightly, but I could see the respect in his eyes. We've got this, Everly. As the days went on, the media storm began to build. I had always known Callista was good at playing the victim, but now he was taking it a step further. News outlets started reporting about our marriage, painting me as a cold, calculating woman who was more interested in money than love. I hadn't anticipated this. I had hoped that the legal battle would be the end of it. But no. Callista, desperate and unwilling to lose control, was now turning the public against me. I watched as the tabloids and blogs spun their version of events. There I was, painted as the villain, the heartless woman who only cared about money. I had expected the battle in the courtroom, but this was a whole new level. I didn't react right away. I couldn't, but I knew I couldn't let this go on for much longer. Picking up the phone, I called my PR team. I needed help. This wasn't just a fight for money, it was a fight for my reputation. And I wasn't going to let Callista destroy it. Get ready, I said to my PR agent, my voice sharp. We're going public with the truth. It's time to take control of the narrative. The night had already settled in, and my mind buzzed with the weight of everything that had transpired in the last few days. The legal papers had been filed, and Callista had been served. It was happening. Everything that had felt like a distant thought was now at my doorstep. And still, I couldn't shake the feeling that he wouldn't stop. He hadn't been playing by the rules, and I had known this from the very beginning. Callista wasn't someone who would let go without a fight. He wasn't just fighting for money. This was about control, his need to dominate and manipulate every inch of my life. Even now, with everything on the line, he wasn't backing down. The message came through just as I was about to shut down for the night. His name flashed across my screen, and I paused, almost tempted to ignore it. But something inside told me I needed to read it. Maybe it was morbid curiosity, Or maybe I was just tired of letting him have any power over me. I opened the text, and his words hit me like a brick. Everly, you're pushing me too far. Don't make me take this public. You know I have more than enough leverage to ruin you. Think about our children, about the legacy we've built. This will destroy everything. I stared at the screen, a coldness settling in my chest. This wasn't the first time he'd used our children as a pawn in his game, but it still made my blood boil. The nerve of him. The sheer audacity to pull out the family card now, after everything he'd done to tear us apart. I took a deep breath, feeling my pulse quicken, but I didn't let the anger control me. I didn't have to. He didn't know it yet, but the power had shifted, and this time, I wasn't going to let him manipulate me into a corner. With steady fingers, I began typing my response. You've done enough, Callista. I'm not afraid of your threats. You're the one who's lost everything. You're not going to control this any longer. And as for the kids, I'll make sure they know the truth. This isn't about a legacy anymore. It's about what you've done to destroy everything we had. You've already lost. I hit send, almost surprised by how calm I felt. I wasn't running anymore. The following morning, the reality of everything hit me again. This wasn't just a legal fight. This was a battle for everything I had worked for, everything I had believed in. I was in this to win, not for the money, but for the right to finally stand up for myself. I sat in my lawyer's office, going over every detail one more time. The documents were spread out before me, bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds. My lawyer, Thomas, sat across the table, a look of quiet determination on his face. I could see the trust he had in our case. We were ready. We've got the evidence, Everly, Thomas said, flipping through the pages. This is solid. Callista's financial misconduct is going to be the cornerstone of our case. We'll expose the manipulation, the deceit. He's not going to walk away from this without answering for his actions. I nodded, focusing on the words in front of me. This isn't just about winning. It's about making him understand that there are consequences for what he's done. I'm not the person I was when we got married. I'm not afraid anymore. Thomas gave me a sharp look, the respect in his eyes clear. I can see that. I felt the surge of power that had been building in me for days now. I wasn't going to let him walk away. Not this time. The media onslaught started soon after. Callista, unable to maintain control over the situation, started using the press to paint me as the villain in our marriage. Headlines blared across the tabloids. CFO's cold-hearted divorce, the truth behind Everly Morrow's fortune, and the cold wife who wants it all. Callista Reed speaks out. I wasn't surprised. I had expected him to turn to the media, to make himself the victim and me the villain. It was his go-to move. But this time, it wasn't working. It wasn't going to break me. I sat in front of my TV that evening, watching the news coverage. My stomach churned as Callista gave his version of events, casting himself as the poor, betrayed husband. The message was clear. She's greedy. She's heartless. She's destroying everything. I could feel my blood boiling, but I didn't let it show. I wasn't going to fall into his trap. Instead, I reached for my phone, dialing my PR team. They answered on the first ring. Get ready, I said, my voice firm. I'm taking control of this narrative. Let's get the truth out there. I could hear the approval in their voices as they agreed to take immediate action. I wasn't going to let Callista paint me as a villain. This wasn't just a fight for my assets. It was a fight for my reputation, and I wasn't about to let him destroy it. I picked up the phone again, drafting a statement that would set the record straight. There would be no more lies, no more manipulation. I left the cafe with the feeling of finality pressing down on me. I didn't look back at Callista, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me waver. The door clicked shut behind me, a soft sound, but it marked the end of something. My heart was pounding, but not with fear. It was something else, something stronger. It was the adrenaline of taking control. The truth was clear now. I wasn't the person who would be controlled by his words anymore. That version of me, the one who was afraid, the one who believed in the lies, was gone. The following days passed in a blur of paperwork, meetings with my lawyer, and the growing realization that Callista was not going to make this easy. He had started off with his usual tactics, smooth words, charm, manipulation, but now, with everything slipping through his fingers, he had resorted to something far more dangerous. The message came on my phone as I sat in my living room, sipping coffee, trying to settle my mind. It was from Callista. "Everly, if you don't settle this, I'll make sure you regret it. I'll expose every secret you've been hiding. Don't think I won't. You'll lose everything." My pulse quickened, but I didn't let it control me. I stared at the message, not even flinching. Callista thought he could scare me into submission, but I knew better now. He had already shown his cards, and they were nothing more than empty threats. I placed my coffee cup down, the porcelain gently clicking against the table. There was no shaking my resolve now. No running. I wasn't that woman anymore. I picked up my phone, my fingers steady as I typed out my response. "You can try, Callista, but you'll only destroy yourself in the process. This is over. I'm done." I hit send. For the first time, I felt the weight of the decision slip off my shoulders. I wasn't reacting anymore. I wasn't the victim. I was in control. The next morning, I sat in the cold, sterile office of my lawyer, reviewing the strategy we had been working on. I had gone over everything once more, every bank statement, every document that proved Callista's manipulation. He had thought he could fool me, but it was clear now. The tables had turned. "Everly, we're ready," Thomas, my lawyer, said as he flipped through the evidence. "You've done everything we need to prove that Callista wasn't just asking for a divorce. He was trying to strip you of everything you worked for." I nodded, feeling the weight of the situation, but there was no fear anymore. Only focus. This was my moment to finally fight back. "Let's go all in," I said. "No more half measures." We spent the next hour reviewing the final steps. I had to be prepared for the worst. Callista was not going to make this easy, but I knew now that he had already lost. The evidence was on my side, and the law was too. I was done being afraid. When we wrapped up, I stood and shook Thomas's hand. "I won't settle, Thomas. Not now, not ever." My voice was steady, strong. I wasn't wavering. Not anymore. As I walked out of the office, the streetlights outside seemed to shine a little brighter. Maybe it was the new dawn in my life, or maybe it was just the clarity that had settled within me. Whatever it was, I was finally where I needed to be. By the time I returned home that evening, the news was already spreading. Callista, ever the narcissist, had gone to the press with his side of the story. The media was now portraying me as the cold, calculating woman who was only interested in money. The headlines were out, and they painted a picture of me that was far from the truth. CFO in bitter divorce, accused of stealing husband's fortune, cold-hearted wife to reap millions, the untold story of Callista Reed's betrayal. I couldn't help but feel a brief flicker of anger, but it wasn't enough to break me. Instead, I turned my focus to the task at hand. Callista's attempt to humiliate me was nothing new, but this time, I wasn't going to let him win. This wasn't about my reputation. This was about truth. And truth, as they say, always has a way of coming out. I didn't react right away. I knew this would get worse before it got better, but I was ready. I reached for my phone and dialed my PR team. "Get ready," I said. "We're going public with the truth." They had been waiting for my signal. We were ready. I didn't have to hide anymore. I wasn't going to let Callista control this narrative. Not anymore. I had spent weeks preparing, and now, the moment I'd been waiting for was finally here. Everything had led to this point. The legal battle, the media storm, the threats, the lies, the manipulation. It was all coming to a head. The final court decision would either confirm my victory or destroy everything I had fought for. As I walked into the courtroom, my heart didn't race the way it once did. There was no nervousness, no unease. There was only a quiet, steady calm in my chest. I had done everything I could. I had fought for what was mine. I had made my stand, and I knew that no matter the outcome, I wouldn't be the same person I was when I started this journey. The judge entered, the room falling silent in an instant. He called the case, and both sides stood. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on me, but I didn't let it shake me. This was my moment. The air in the courtroom felt thick with tension as the judge reviewed the case. I watched as he flipped through the evidence, the financial records, the manipulations Callista had hidden behind his charming smile. The case had been long, exhausting, and at times I'd questioned if I could carry on. But sitting here, now I felt strong. The evidence was clear. Callista Reed has shown consistent disregard for the fairness of the financial dealings within this marriage, the judge said, his voice firm. The demands for the settlement were unreasonable, and I have reviewed the evidence thoroughly. It is clear that Mr. Reed has manipulated the situation for his own gain. The room fell into a hushed silence as the judge turned to me. I hereby rule in favor of Everly Morrow. You are entitled to full control of your assets, and Mr. Reed is ordered to pay for the legal fees of this case. Furthermore, the evidence of financial misconduct is substantial, and Callista Reed will face public scrutiny for his actions. I didn't feel a rush of triumph. There was no celebratory feeling bubbling up inside me. It was the finality of the moment, the calm acknowledgement that I had won. I looked at Callista, sitting across from me, his face ashen, his once confident posture now slouched. His jaw tightened, and I could see the humiliation in his eyes. His smug grin, the one he'd worn for so long, was gone. The game was over. But I didn't smile. I didn't need to. I was free. After the verdict was read, there was no celebration, no fanfare. It wasn't about the money or the legal victory. It was about what this meant for me. I was finally taking back what was mine, not just the assets, but my life. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that Callista wasn't done. It wasn't over. Sure enough, the very next day, Callista contacted me. He called, his voice surprisingly calm, almost resigned. He admitted that he had made a mistake, that he regretted how things had turned out. He apologized, claiming he had let greed cloud his judgment, and asked for a second chance. I listened to his words, and for a brief moment, I let myself remember the man I once loved, the man I had given up so much for. But that man was gone, replaced by someone far more dangerous. Callista, I said, my voice steady, the damage you've caused is too great. There's no going back. I've already moved on. I'm not interested in reconciliation. I'm done. He stayed silent for a long time, as if waiting for me to change my mind. But I didn't. I had already made my decision. I'm sorry, he said quietly, and for a moment, I almost thought I heard a hint of sincerity. But I didn't fall for it. Not anymore. I hung up, not with anger, but with a sense of closure. There was no more to say. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork and meetings, but I was finally at peace. The weight I'd carried for so long had been lifted. I wasn't just physically free, I was mentally free. I had reclaimed my autonomy, my dignity, and most importantly, my future. I threw myself into my work, diving into a new project I had been postponing for years. It was a challenge, one that was mine alone, and it felt right. This was my fresh start, my opportunity to build something I could be proud of on my own terms. As I sat at my desk, reviewing new business proposals and plans for the future, I realized something important. I was finally happy. Not because I had won the battle with Callista, but because I had found myself again. I was no longer defined by my marriage, my past, or the lies I'd lived through. Callista's world, on the other hand, was beginning to crumble. His reputation in the business world was fading, his financial empire teetering on the edge. He had always been so sure of himself, so confident in his ability to manipulate everyone around him, but now the cracks were showing. His own pride had led him here, to this moment of loss and humiliation. I didn't feel sorry for him, but there was a certain sadness in knowing that the person I once loved had been replaced by someone so different, so consumed by his own desires. I could finally see the truth clearly. There was no room for him in my life anymore. I stood in front of the full-length mirror, my reflection staring back at me, but it wasn't just the woman I had been, someone who had been manipulated, controlled, and silenced by the man I once loved. No, this woman was different. This woman had been through hell and come out stronger on the other side. I was no longer the passive wife, the woman who endured, the one who didn't speak up. I had found my voice, my strength, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me again. The past few months had been a whirlwind. The legal battle had taken its toll, but it had also shown me something I hadn't realized before. I had power, real, undeniable power. I wasn't just a victim anymore, fighting for survival. I was a warrior now, and every battle had made me stronger. The phone rang, and I knew it was him before I even looked at the screen. Callista! He was persistent, if nothing else. I debated for a moment. Should I answer? What more could he possibly have to say? But I knew. This was the last time I would have to hear him plead, the last time I would ever be at the mercy of his lies and manipulations. I picked up the phone, my hand steady, my heart calm. Everly! His voice came through, surprisingly gentle, almost apologetic. I know this has been hard for both of us, but I just want to talk. We've been through so much together. Let's settle this, for the sake of our family, for the kids. I closed my eyes for a brief second, almost wishing I could still believe the words he spoke. But I knew better now. He wasn't sorry. He never was. Callista! I said, my voice unwavering. The truth is I've moved on. You had your chance. There's no going back. I'm not looking to fix this anymore. I'm done. He fell silent, and for the first time, I felt like the one in control. I had no desire to rehash old wounds, no need for reconciliation. The woman I used to be would have let him back in, would have begged for things to be different. But I wasn't her anymore. I was free. I hung up without a second thought. The air outside was cool as I stood on my balcony, the city stretching out before me. There was something oddly peaceful about it, like I was finally seeing the world as it was, not through the lens of my past. Everly Morrow, the name felt different now. It wasn't just a title. It was a declaration. I had reclaimed what was mine. Not just my assets, but my life. I had taken back my power, my autonomy. The court ruling had been the turning point, but it was only the beginning. I wasn't done. I had so much more to accomplish, so many things I had put off for so long. My career, my passions, my future, all of it was mine to build. And I wasn't going to let anyone stop me. I spent the next few weeks immersed in work, but not just any work. It was my work. The projects I had always wanted to pursue, but had been too afraid to. My career was no longer a backup plan to someone else's dreams. It was mine. And along the way, I found myself again. I surrounded myself with people who saw me for who I truly was, not the wife of someone, not someone else's shadow. I began to build a new network, one based on respect and shared interests. The people around me now were different from before, and it felt right. They valued me, not just for my wealth, but for my wisdom, my experience, my strength. I had fought so hard to get here. The court case, the lies, the public attacks. It had all felt like one long, impossible journey. But as I sat in the park, the soft breeze lifting my hair, I realized something. I had won. Not because of the legal victory, not because of the money or the settlements. I had won because I had found myself. I had come out the other side stronger than I had ever been. I sat down on the bench, looking out at the world around me. People walked by, oblivious to the battle I'd fought. But I had made peace with it. I didn't need validation from anyone else. This was my life, and I was finally living it the way I had always wanted to. I thought of the woman I had been before, naive, hopeful, willing to believe the best in everyone, even when they didn't deserve it. The woman who had given everything for a marriage that had never been what she thought it was. I still carried her with me, but now she was just a part of who I was. She was a reminder of how far I had come, how much I had learned. But that woman wasn't the one I needed to be anymore. She was buried now, and I was moving forward. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure: I was ready for it. And nothing, no one, was going to take that away from me. The air smelled different now, fresher. As I stood up from the bench, I felt the last of my old fears dissolve like the morning mist under the sun. I was walking away from the past, from the pain, from everything that had held me back. I was free. As the story draws to a close, remember this: it's never too late to take back control of your life. In the face of betrayal, manipulation, and pain, Everly showed us that true strength lies in standing up for yourself, no matter the cost. Life may throw unexpected challenges your way, but it's how you respond that defines you. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to reclaim your power? What did it take for you to move on? Share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience, strength, and the triumph of the human spirit. Stay tuned for the next chapter.